Marcus Chen stood at the viewing port of the transport ship, watching the planet Valoria grow larger in the window. It was beautiful, a world of blue oceans and white clouds, with massive crystal structures that rose from the surface like frozen lightning. These were the famous Valorian palaces, built from materials that could last 1,000,000 years. "We're approaching the landing zone, Ambassador," the pilot said from behind him. Marcus nodded but didn't turn away from the view. He was nervous, though he tried not to show it. This was the most important mission of his life. Maybe the most important mission in human history. Earth needed help. Humanity had only been in space for 50 years, and already they had made enemies. The Kryn Empire wanted human colony worlds. The Sector Collective saw humans as primitive and dangerous. Without protection, without allies, humanity might not survive another decade. That's why Marcus was here. The Galactic Council could offer that protection. Membership in the Council meant safety, trade routes, and access to technology that could advance human civilization by centuries. But getting in wasn't easy. You needed a sponsor, a powerful species to vouch for you. The Valorians had agreed to sponsor humanity. It seemed like a miracle. The ship landed smoothly on a platform made of the same crystal as the palaces. Marcus gathered his things, a datapad with Earth's proposal, a small gift from Earth's government, and his translation device. The device was old, given to him by the diplomatic corps. It had served Earth's ambassadors for 20 years. As he stepped off the ship, the heat hit him first. Valoria was warmer than Earth, and the air smelled like flowers he couldn't name. Then he saw them, the Valorians. They were tall, much taller than humans. Their skin had a faint blue tint that seemed to glow in the sunlight. They moved with perfect grace, like dancers. Everything about them seemed designed to be beautiful. Marcus understood why other species called them the jewels of the galaxy. A group of Valorian officials waited at the end of the platform. In the center stood a woman who took Marcus's breath away. She wore robes that shifted colors as she moved, and her hair floated around her head as if she were underwater. "Ambassador Chen," she said, her voice like music. "I am Princess Lyrazeth, daughter of Queen Thylara. Welcome to Valoria. We are honored to meet humanity's representative." Marcus bowed, as he had been taught. "The honor is mine, Princess. Earth is grateful for this opportunity." She smiled, and Marcus felt his nervousness fade a little. Maybe this would go well after all. The next 3 days were wonderful. Princess Lyrazeth gave Marcus a tour of the Crystal Palace. She showed him gardens with plants from 100 worlds, libraries with books that were older than human civilization, and meeting halls where the fate of the galaxy had been decided for thousands of years. But more than that, she talked to him, really talked to him. She asked about Earth, not just facts from reports, but real questions. What was it like to live on a world with seasons? What did humans do for fun? What were Marcus's favorite foods? His favorite stories from childhood? Marcus found himself relaxing around her. He told her about growing up in Beijing, about his grandmother who raised him, about the first time he saw the stars from space. She laughed at his jokes. She seemed genuinely interested in everything he said. "You know," she said on the second day, as they walked through a garden filled with floating lights, "most species that come here are so formal. They treat every conversation like a negotiation. But you're different. You're real." "Should I be more formal?" Marcus asked, suddenly worried he'd made a mistake. "No," she said quickly. "No, this is better. I think humans and Valorians could be real friends, not just political allies. Don't you?" Marcus smiled. "I'd like that." They worked on the treaty together. Lyrazeth explained each section, answered all his questions, and even made changes when Marcus suggested them. It seemed too good to be true. On the third day, they finished. The treaty was ready for signing. The ceremony was held in the Grand Hall, a massive room with walls made entirely of crystal. Light came through from every direction, making everything glow. Ambassadors from 70 different species sat in viewing galleries, watching. This was a big moment, a new species joining the council. At the far end of the hall, on a throne that seemed carved from a single piece of crystal, sat Queen Thylara. She was older than her daughter, but just as beautiful. She watched everything with eyes that seemed to see through walls. Marcus stood at a table in the center of the hall. Princess Lyrazeth stood across from him, smiling. Between them lay the treaty, displayed on a crystal tablet that showed the text in both English and Valorian script. "Before we sign," Lyrazeth said formally, "I will read the oath of partnership in the old tongue, as tradition demands." She began to speak in ancient Valorian, her voice echoing through the hall. Marcus's translation device worked on the first few sentences, standard diplomatic language about friendship and mutual benefit. Then something strange happened. The device started making a clicking noise. Marcus tapped it, thinking it was broken. The clicking stopped, and suddenly he could understand what Lyrazeth was saying, but it wasn't what he expected. "And the new species agrees to provide military forces for all conflicts designated by Valoria, to surrender voting rights on matters of Valorian interest, to serve the greater glory of the Valorian Empire for 1,000 standard years." Marcus felt cold. He looked down at the English text on the tablet. It said nothing about military service or surrendering rights. It was a simple partnership agreement. He looked up at Princess Lyrazeth. She was still smiling, still reciting the ancient words. But now he saw something different in her eyes. Satisfaction. Victory. She had lied. All of it. The friendship, the conversations, the laughter, had been a performance. The real treaty would make humanity slaves. The hall was silent except for her voice. Every ambassador watched. Queen Thylara leaned forward on her throne, waiting. Marcus's hand moved toward the signing stylus. Everyone expected him to sign. Earth needed this. Humanity needed this. But Marcus stopped. His hand hung in the air for a long moment. Then he did something no one expected. He closed the treaty tablet and took a step back. "No," he said quietly. "No. Thank you." The Grand Hall became completely silent. Princess Lyrazeth stopped speaking mid-sentence. Her smile froze on her face, then slowly disappeared. "I'm sorry," she said, as if she hadn't heard correctly. "Ambassador Chen, perhaps there was a translation error." "There was no error," Marcus said clearly in perfect formal Valorian. He had spent the last 3 days learning key phrases just in case. "I understand exactly what you said, and my answer is no." A wave of whispers spread through the viewing galleries. 70 species, hundreds of ambassadors, all began talking at once. Marcus could hear the shock in their voices, even though he couldn't understand most of their languages. Princess Lyrazeth's face changed. The warmth was gone. Now she looked cold, calculating. "Ambassador, you must understand that this treaty is humanity's only path to council membership. Without our sponsorship, Earth will remain alone, vulnerable." "Then we'll remain alone," Marcus said. He picked up his datapad and the small gift from Earth that he had never given her. His hands were steady, even though his heart was racing. He had just destroyed everything Earth had worked for. His government would be furious. History might remember him as the man who doomed humanity. But he couldn't sign that treaty. He wouldn't. Marcus turned away from the table and began walking toward the exit. The massive crystal doors were at least 100 meters away. It felt like 1,000. His footsteps echoed in the silent hall. Click, click, click. Everyone watched. No one moved, no one spoke. From her throne, Queen Thylara sat forward for the first time since the ceremony began. Her eyes followed Marcus as he walked. Something flickered across her ancient face. Surprise, maybe. or interest. "Ambassador Chen," Princess Lyrazeth called out, her voice sharp now. "Stop! We can discuss modifications to the agreement. There's no need for this dramatic behavior." Marcus didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. He kept his eyes on the doors ahead, his back straight, his head high. "You're making a terrible mistake!" Lyrazeth's voice was louder now, angry. "Do you think any other species will sponsor you after this insult? You're throwing away humanity's future." Click, click, click. Marcus's footsteps were the only sound. In the viewing galleries, ambassadors leaned forward, whispering urgently to each other. The ambassador from Keltor, a species that had been under Valorian protection for 3 centuries, stood up from his seat, staring at Marcus with wide eyes. "He's just walking away," someone whispered in accented English. "He's actually walking away." Princess Lyrazeth looked up at her mother on the throne. Queen Thylara raised one hand slightly, a signal. Lyrazeth's mouth closed. She stood frozen at the signing table, watching Marcus leave. The human was 50 meters from the doors now. 40 meters. 30. One of the Valorian guards near the exit looked uncertain. Should he open the doors? Should he stop the human? He glanced back at the queen. She nodded once. The guard stepped aside, 20 meters from the doors now. Ambassador Kellis of the Mintar Collective, a small species that had signed a treaty with Valoria 60 years ago, suddenly stood up. His voice carried across the hall. "Ambassador Chen speaks with wisdom." Several other ambassadors turned to look at him in shock. "You didn't challenge Valoria publicly. You just didn't." But Kellis continued, his voice shaking but clear. Perhaps we should all examine our agreements more carefully." 10 meters from the doors, Princess Lyrazeth spun to face the viewing galleries. "Silence! This human speaks from ignorance and fear. He doesn't understand galactic politics. Don't let his foolishness infect your thinking." But it was too late. Marcus could see it even as he walked, the doubt spreading through the galleries like ripples in water. Ambassadors were looking at each other, thinking thoughts they had never dared to think before. What if we could say no? What if we could just walk away? 5 meters from the doors. Marcus reached them and stopped. The doors were huge, made of crystal so thick it bent the light. He stood there for just a moment, taking a breath. Then he pushed. The doors swung open smoothly, letting in bright sunlight and warm air. Marcus stepped through. Behind him, he heard Princess Lyrazeth say something in rapid Valorian to her guards. He didn't need his translator to understand the tone: fury, confusion, desperation. But then Queen Thylara's voice cut through everything else. Just one word in the old tongue, but it carried absolute authority. The guards stopped moving. Marcus walked through the doors. They began to close behind him with a deep rumbling sound that shook the floor. In the last moment before they sealed shut, he heard Ambassador Kellis's voice again. "I wish to request a review of the Mintar Treaty terms." Then the doors closed with a thunderous boom that echoed across the crystal platform. Marcus stood in the bright sunlight, breathing hard. His hands were shaking now that no one could see them. He had done it. He had actually done it. His communicator buzzed. Earth was calling, probably furious, demanding to know what happened. Marcus ignored it for now. He would face that soon enough. He walked toward his transport ship. The pilot was waiting at the bottom of the ramp, eyes wide with confusion. "Ambassador, I saw the ceremony feed. Are we leaving?" "Yes," Marcus said simply. "But, sir, what about the treaty? What about council membership?" Marcus climbed the ramp and turned back to look at the Crystal Palace one last time. Through the massive windows, he could see chaos in the grand hall. Ambassadors were standing, arguing, gesturing wildly. "We don't need them to let us in," Marcus said quietly. "We just need to remember that we can always walk away." Inside the palace, Queen Thylara remained seated on her throne, watching through the windows as the human ship lifted off. Her face showed no emotion, but her mind was racing. In 400 years of rule, she had never seen anything like this. Princess Lyraseth approached the throne, her face twisted with anger and embarrassment. "Mother, he insulted us! In front of the entire council, we must—" "Be silent," the queen said softly. Lyraseth stopped, shocked. Her mother never used that tone with her. Queen Thylara watched the human ship disappear into the sky. "You thought you caught a desperate creature in your trap," she said, "but you didn't understand what you were hunting." "I don't understand," Lyraseth said. "I know," Queen Thylara replied. "That's the problem." The queen stood from her throne for the first time in months and walked slowly toward her private chambers. Behind her, the grand hall descended into unprecedented chaos. Everything had changed. The news spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within hours, every species in the Galactic Council knew what had happened. The human ambassador had walked away. He had simply said no and left. Most species didn't understand it. "Why would they refuse?" asked the Torvan ambassador to his staff. "They needed council membership. Everyone knows humans are surrounded by enemies." But a few species understood perfectly. They were the ones who had signed treaties with Valoria decades or centuries ago. They were the ones who had discovered hidden clauses too late. They were the ones who now served Valorian interests instead of their own. They had never imagined they could walk away. On Earth, Marcus landed at the diplomatic headquarters in Geneva. He walked off his ship expecting to be arrested or at least fired. Instead, he found dozens of messages waiting for him, not from Earth's government, but from other species. The Keltorian ambassador wanted to meet. The Mintar Collective requested a private conversation. The Yavi Union asked if humanity would share information about treaty negotiations with Valoria. 17 different species, all reaching out within the first day. Marcus sat in the debriefing room with Director Sarah Morrison, head of Earth's diplomatic corps. She was 50 years old, gray-haired, and had been negotiating with alien species since humanity's first contact. "I should fire you," she said, but she was smiling slightly. "Do you know how many years we worked to get that meeting?" "I know," Marcus said quietly. "I'm sorry, but Director, you didn't hear what she said. They wanted to own us. For 1,000 years. Sarah nodded slowly. "I read your report. The translation device recording everything." She pulled up a holographic display showing messages from dozens of species. "Look at this. This is what you started." Marcus read through the messages, species asking questions, requesting information, sharing their own stories of Valorian treaties that seemed fair but weren't. "They're waking up," Sarah said. "For the first time in centuries, smaller species are questioning the system, and they're looking to us for leadership." "Us?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "We're not even in the council. We have no power, no allies, nothing." "That's exactly why they trust us," Sarah said. "We had nothing to gain by walking away. We did it purely on principle. That means something to species who forgot they could have principles." Over the next week, something unprecedented happened. Ambassador Kellis of the Mintar Collective formally requested a full review of his species' treaty with Valoria. 3 other species did the same. The Galactic Council, which usually met once every 6 months, called an emergency session. Marcus watched the session from Earth through the communication network. He saw the chaos firsthand. "This is absurd," shouted the Valorian representative. "These treaties were signed legally and fairly. If species are unhappy, they should have read more carefully." "We did read carefully," said Ambassador Kellis, his small frame shaking with anger. "But we read the translation you provided, not the original language, just like you tried to do with humanity." The session dissolved into arguments. Species that had been silent for centuries suddenly had voices. The Valorian representatives tried to control the situation, but they were losing ground. On Valoria itself, Princess Lyriseth stood in her mother's throne room. She had been summoned, but the queen hadn't spoken yet. Thylara simply sat on her throne, reading reports on a crystal tablet. 32 species have now requested treaty reviews, the queen finally said. 18 species have filed formal complaints. The Galactic Council is in chaos, and all because of one human who walked away. "It's not my fault!" Lyriseth burst out. "The treaty was perfect. The clauses were hidden exactly as they always are. He shouldn't have been able to understand the old tongue. His translator was just a basic model." "And yet he did understand," the queen said quietly. "Do you know why?" Lyriseth was silent. "Because he didn't trust us," Queen Thylara continued. "He came here expecting deception. He prepared for it. He learned our language, studied our history, and brought recording devices. He treated us like potential enemies, not friends. But I was so kind to him. I made him feel welcome." "Yes," the queen said, "and that was your mistake. You showed him friendship while planning betrayal. Do you know what that taught him?" Lyriseth shook her head. "It taught him that Valorians cannot be trusted, and now, through his actions, he's taught the entire galaxy the same lesson." The queen stood and walked to a window overlooking the crystal gardens. "We built our power on a simple principle: make others believe they have no choice but to accept our terms. We've done this for 3,000 years. It worked because no one ever challenged the basic assumption." "Until now," Lyriseth said quietly. "Until now," the queen agreed. Meanwhile, on Earth, Marcus met with representatives from 12 different species in a secure facility outside Geneva. They sat around a table, some in person, some appearing as holograms because their biology couldn't handle Earth's environment. "We want to propose something," said Ambassador Kellis, "an alternative to the traditional council structure. A coalition of independent species who trade and cooperate as equals." "You want to leave the council?" Marcus asked, surprised. "The council is controlled by 4 major powers," said Ambassador Inara of the Yavi Union. Her people looked like large birds with colorful feathers. "Valoria, the Kryn Empire, the Door Collective, and the Sector Union. Everyone else just follows their rules. But your people showed us something. We don't have to." "What do you need from humanity?" Director Morrison asked carefully. "A founding member," said Kellis. "A species willing to base a new organization on actual fairness, not hidden clauses and power games. Humans have nothing to gain from cheating us. You're as weak as we are. That makes you trustworthy." Marcus looked at Sarah. She nodded slightly. "We'll need to discuss this with our government," Marcus said, "but personally, I think humanity would be honored." Over the next month, the Independent Coalition was born. 12 species at first, then 17, then 23. They were all small, weak species by galactic standards. None of them had powerful militaries or vast resources. But together, they represented a significant portion of galactic trade. More importantly, they represented an idea that species could work together without someone being in charge, without hidden clauses, without tricks. The major powers of the Galactic Council watched nervously. The Kryn Empire issued statements calling the coalition naive and doomed to fail. The Door Collective tried to pressure member species to return to the fold. But Valoria was silent. Queen Thylara issued no statements, made no threats. She simply watched. In her private chambers, she studied everything she could find about humanity: their history, their wars, their literature, their philosophy. She was looking for something specific. Why would a species risk everything over a principle? She found her answer in human history books, in stories of people who fought against impossible odds, who chose freedom over safety, who said no when everyone expected yes. "They're very short-lived," she said to her chief advisor. "Most humans live less than 100 years. "Yes, Your Majesty, that's quite brief. "So they don't have time to accept situations and wait for better days," the Queen continued. "They must act now, in their one brief life or not at all. That makes them dangerous." "Dangerous, Your Majesty?" "To systems built on patience," the Queen said. "To empires that rely on others accepting the inevitable." She closed the books. "They don't believe anything is inevitable, and now they've taught others to think the same way." The Queen made a decision that shocked her entire court. She requested a private meeting with Ambassador Marcus Chen. Not a negotiation, not a ceremony, just a conversation. When her advisors protested, she silenced them with a look. "I watched this human walk away while 70 species watched," she said. "I watched him risk his entire civilization's future because he wouldn't accept dishonor. I need to understand that kind of thinking, because it just changed the galaxy." The invitation was sent to Earth the next day. Marcus read it 3 times, unsure if it was real. "It's a trap," said one of his colleagues. "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "But I'm going anyway." 3 months had passed since Marcus walked out of the Grand Hall. 3 months that changed everything. The Independent Coalition now had 41 member species. They met every week through holographic conferences, sharing technology, trading resources, and helping each other solve problems. There were no hidden clauses, no secret deals. When the Yavi Union needed medical supplies, 5 species sent help immediately. When the Keltorian economy struggled, the coalition organized a trade agreement that benefited everyone. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments and disagreements, but there was also trust, something most of these species hadn't experienced in their dealings with larger powers. On Earth, Marcus had become something of a hero. News networks called him the man who said no. Children learned about him in schools, but Marcus himself felt uncomfortable with the attention. He was just a diplomat who had done what seemed right. He stood in Director Morrison's office, looking at the invitation from Queen Thylara again. It had been sitting on his desk for a week. "You don't have to go," Sarah said. She was drinking coffee, her 3rd cup that morning. "No one would blame you for refusing." "But you think I should go?" Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "I think," Sarah chose her words carefully, "I think the Queen doesn't invite people to private meetings unless it's important. And I think whatever she wants to discuss could affect not just humanity but the entire coalition." Marcus nodded slowly. "When does my ship leave?" "Tomorrow morning." "If you agree to go." "I'll go," Marcus said. "But this time, I'm bringing better recording equipment." Sarah smiled. "Already packed on the ship." The journey to Valoria took 3 days. Marcus spent most of that time reading everything he could about Queen Thylara. She was over 400 years old. She had ruled Valoria for 3 centuries. She had negotiated treaties with thousands of species and had never lost a political battle. Until now, Marcus thought. Until a human walked away. When his ship landed on Valoria, everything was different from his first visit. No ceremony, no crowds of officials. Just 2 simple guards who escorted him through quiet hallways to a part of the palace he hadn't seen before. They walked through gardens where flowers grew in impossible colors, past fountains that sang when water touched them. Through doorways carved with symbols Marcus couldn't read. Finally, they reached a simple room with walls made of clear crystal. You could see the gardens outside from every direction. In the center of the room was a small table with 2 chairs. Queen Thylara sat in one chair, waiting. Marcus had seen her before, but only from a distance in the throne room. Up close, she was even more impressive. Her eyes were the blue of deep oceans, and when she looked at him, Marcus felt like she could see everything he had ever thought or done. "Ambassador Chen," she said. Her voice was calm, musical. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." Marcus sat carefully. The guards left, closing the door behind them. They were alone. For a long moment, neither spoke. The queen studied him with those ancient eyes. "You've caused quite a disruption," she finally said. "I didn't mean to, Your Majesty," Marcus replied honestly. "Didn't you?" A slight smile touched her lips. "You walked away knowing that 70 species were watching. You knew it would have an effect." "I knew I couldn't sign that treaty," Marcus said. "Everything else, I didn't plan that." The queen nodded slowly. "I believe you, which makes it even more interesting." She poured water from a crystal pitcher into 2 glasses. "Tell me, Ambassador, why did you walk away?" "Because the treaty was unfair." "No," she interrupted gently. "Many treaties are unfair. That's politics. Species sign unfair treaties every day because they need something: protection, resources, membership. Your people needed council membership desperately. So why walk away?" Marcus thought about how to answer. "Because some costs are too high. Because serving someone else for 1,000 years would destroy what makes us human. We'd rather face our enemies alone than lose ourselves. Even if facing your enemies alone means extinction." "Even then," Marcus said firmly. The queen leaned back in her chair, studying him. "Do you know what I saw when you walked out of that hall? I saw something I haven't seen in 300 years. I saw someone who valued something more than survival." She stood and walked to the crystal wall, looking out at the gardens. Most species in the galaxy have achieved a certain level of comfort and technology. They live long lives, centuries, sometimes millennia. And over time, they forget how to take risks. They accept unfavorable situations because they have time to wait for better days. They think in terms of centuries, not years. Marcus listened carefully. "But humans," the queen continued, "you live such brief lives. 60, 70, maybe 100 years if you're lucky. You don't have time to wait. You must act now, in this moment, or the opportunity is gone forever." She turned back to face him. "That makes you dangerous. Not because you're strong, you're not. Not because you're advanced, you're quite primitive by galactic standards. But because you remember something the rest of the galaxy forgot, that some principles matter more than survival." "Is that why you invited me here?" Marcus asked. "To tell me we're dangerous." "No," the queen said. "I invited you here to tell you that you're right." Marcus blinked in surprise. The queen returned to her seat. "For 3,000 years, Valoria has built its power on manipulation and careful control. We made others believe they had no choice. We trapped them in agreements they didn't fully understand, and it worked because no one challenged us." "Until now," Marcus said quietly. "Until now," she agreed. "My daughter tried the same technique on you that we've used successfully for millennia. But she made a critical error. She assumed humans think like everyone else. She assumed you would choose survival over dignity." The queen picked up her glass but didn't drink. "I've spent 3 months studying your species. Your history is violent, chaotic, often tragic. You fight wars over ideas. You sacrifice yourselves for strangers. You choose death over dishonor with shocking regularity. It's fascinating." "We're not special," Marcus said. "We just do what seems right." "That's exactly what makes you special," the queen replied. "The galaxy has forgotten how to do what seems right when the cost is high. You reminded them, and now 41 species have joined your coalition, all of them remembering that they can choose principles over politics." She set down her glass and looked directly at Marcus. "The old system is breaking. The system my ancestors built. The system I've maintained. And I find myself in an unusual position. I think that's a good thing." Marcus couldn't hide his shock. "You want the system to break?" I want the system to evolve, the Queen corrected. Power built on deception is ultimately weak. It requires constant effort to maintain the illusion. Your coalition, built on actual trust and mutual benefit, is stronger than it appears. That's why the other major powers are nervous. She pulled out a crystal tablet and slid it across the table. This is a treaty proposal. Real terms, no hidden clauses, written in clear language that anyone can understand. It offers humanity and the entire independent coalition formal recognition by the Galactic Council, with full rights and no obligations beyond standard mutual defense. Marcus stared at the tablet but didn't touch it. Why? Because I'm 400 years old, and I've seen enough to know when something fundamental is changing, the Queen said. Your coalition will grow with or without Council recognition. Better to adapt now than to fight an inevitable shift. And Princess Lyrazeth? Marcus asked. Does she agree with this? The Queen's expression became harder. My daughter is learning a difficult lesson. She confused manipulation with intelligence, trickery with strategy. She'll need to learn that real power comes from reliability, not deception. This will take time. Marcus finally picked up the tablet and began reading. The terms were clear, straightforward, exactly as the Queen described. You'll want your people to examine every word, the Queen said. I expect nothing less. Take as much time as you need. Thank you, Your Majesty, Marcus said. Don't thank me yet, the Queen replied with a slight smile. Thank me when you finish reading and realize I'm serious. They talked for another hour. Not about treaties or politics, but about philosophy, about human history and Valorian culture, about the nature of power and trust. Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying the conversation. As he prepared to leave, the Queen said one more thing. You taught my daughter a valuable lesson, Ambassador Chen. You taught her that when you treat someone as a fool, they have no reason to make you look wise. I hope she remembers it. Marcus bowed respectfully. I hope we can all learn from each other, Your Majesty. He left the palace with the treaty proposal and a strange feeling that something important had shifted in the galaxy. Marcus returned to Earth with the Queen's treaty proposal. He expected his government to be cautious, suspicious even. Instead, he found excitement mixed with careful optimism. Director Sarah Morrison assembled a team of experts, lawyers, linguists, diplomats, and even philosophers, to examine every word of the treaty. They worked for 2 weeks straight, analyzing the document from every possible angle. It's clean, said Dr. Patricia Williams, Earth's chief legal expert on alien treaties. She looked exhausted but amazed. I've checked it in 5 different languages. I've compared it to standard council agreements. There are no hidden clauses, no tricky phrases, nothing that would obligate us beyond what's explicitly stated. That seems too good to be true, Marcus said. It did to me, too, Patricia agreed. But I think the Queen is serious. She's offering us something real. The coalition members were informed immediately. An emergency meeting was called, with representatives from all 41 species joining through holographic projection. The meeting room in Geneva looked like a rainbow of different alien forms, some tall, some small, some looking like birds, others like walking plants. Ambassador Kellis spoke first. This is what we've been working toward, recognition, legitimacy, but we must be careful. Valoria has deceived before. That's true, said Ambassador Inara, her feathers ruffling with agitation. But this treaty is different from the one they offered humanity before. It's written in clear language. We've all read it. The question is whether we trust them, said Ambassador Preeth of the Solaran cluster. His people were known for their logical thinking. More specifically, whether we trust that the Queen has actually changed her approach. All eyes turned to Marcus. He hadn't expected to be the one to answer, but he understood why they looked to him. He was the one who had walked away. He was the one the Queen had invited for a private conversation. I can't tell you what to decide, Marcus said carefully. "But I can tell you what I observed. The Queen is old, incredibly old. She's seen empires rise and fall, and I think she recognizes that the old way of doing things is ending. She can either fight against it or adapt to it. She's choosing to adapt." "But can we trust her?" Kelly's pressed. "I don't know if we can trust her," Marcus admitted. "But I know we can trust ourselves. We've built something here that works. We've proven that species can cooperate without deception. If we accept this treaty, we do it from a position of strength, not desperation. We're not begging to join their system. They're acknowledging that our system has value." The room was silent for a moment. Then Ambassador Inara spread her wings slightly, a gesture of agreement among her people. "The human speaks wisdom. We vote yes." One by one, the other species agreed. The coalition would accept the Queen's treaty, but they would do it together, as equals. 3 weeks later, another ceremony was held in the Grand Hall of Valoria, but this time everything was different. Marcus stood at the signing table again, but he wasn't alone. 41 ambassadors stood with him, representing the entire independent coalition. They wore their different styles of clothing, stood at their different heights, spoke in their different languages. Together, they represented something new in galactic politics. On the other side of the table stood Queen Tilara herself, not Princess Lyra Zeth. The Queen had insisted on conducting this ceremony personally. The viewing galleries were packed again. Every species in the Galactic Council wanted to witness this moment. But the atmosphere was different from before. There was no arrogance, no sense of a powerful empire granting favors to desperate petitioners. This felt like a meeting between equals. The Queen spoke first, her voice carrying through the hall without amplification. 3 months ago, in this very hall, something unprecedented happened. Ambassador Marcus Chen of Humanity walked away from a treaty that was designed to trap rather than partner. In doing so, he reminded the galaxy of something we had forgotten, that dignity matters more than convenience, that principles are worth defending, even at great cost. She paused, letting her words sink in. Since that day, 41 species have come together to form the Independent Coalition. They have shown that cooperation based on trust is possible. They have shown that the old ways are not the only ways. And they have forced me, to reconsider how we engage with the galaxy. Marcus noticed movement in a side entrance. Princess Lyra Zeth entered quietly and stood in the shadows. She wasn't participating in the ceremony, but she was watching. Her face showed no emotion, but Marcus thought he saw something in her eyes. Regret, perhaps, or maybe respect. The Queen continued. This treaty is different from those we have offered in the past. It contains no hidden terms, no unclear language, no traps. It is built on the principle that all species, regardless of size or power, deserve honest dealings. If we are to move forward into a better future, we must do so with integrity. She picked up the signing stylus. The Valorian Empire formally recognizes the Independent Coalition as a legitimate galactic organization with all rights and privileges afforded to council members. We pledge to engage with coalition members as partners, not subjects. She signed the treaty. Then Marcus stepped forward. His hand was steadier this time. He knew what he was signing. There were no surprises waiting in ancient languages. He added his signature, and one by one, all 41 coalition ambassadors did the same. When the last signature was added, something unexpected happened. The gathered ambassadors in the viewing galleries, representatives from species not in the coalition, began to applaud. It started slowly, then grew louder. Even ambassadors from the Kryn Empire and the Door Collective joined in. It wasn't just applause for a treaty signing. It was applause for a change in how things were done. After the ceremony, Marcus found himself walking through the crystal gardens with the Queen. Guards followed at a respectful distance, But the Queen wanted a private conversation. "You've changed the galaxy, Ambassador Chen," she said. "In just 3 months, you've accomplished what I thought was impossible. You've made honesty seem like strength instead of weakness." "It wasn't just me," Marcus said. "It was all of us, every species that chose to take a risk." "True," the Queen agreed. "But you were the first. You walked away when everyone expected you to stay. That took remarkable courage." They reached a fountain that created music as water fell into it. The Queen stopped to listen for a moment. "I have a question," she finally said. "What will you do now?" "You're a hero to your people, to the entire coalition. You could have any position you want." Marcus smiled. "I think I'll keep being a diplomat. There's still a lot of work to do. 41 species working together is just the beginning. There are hundreds of other species who might benefit from joining us. And we need to show the galaxy that our way actually works, not just in words, but in actions." "A wise choice," the Queen said. "And if you need assistance, genuine assistance, not manipulation, Veloria will provide it. We're learning a new way of doing things, too." As Marcus prepared to leave Veloria for the second time, he passed Princess Lyrazeth in a corridor. She was alone, no attendants or guards with her. She stopped when she saw him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she bowed slightly, the Valorian gesture of genuine respect. "I owe you an apology, Ambassador Chen. I treated you dishonestly. I thought I was being clever, but I was only being cruel." Marcus was surprised by her directness. "Thank you for saying that, Princess." "My mother says I have much to learn," Lyrazeth continued, "about trust, about respect, about real strength. I think she's right. Perhaps someday I can earn your trust properly." "Perhaps," Marcus agreed. "Everyone deserves a second chance." He bowed to her in return and continued to his ship. 6 months later, the independent coalition had grown to 63 species. They had established trade routes, shared technology, and resolved conflicts through negotiation rather than force. Other major powers in the galaxy watched with interest, and, Marcus suspected, a bit of nervousness. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not by begging for acceptance, not by compromising their values, but by standing firm on principle and showing others that a better way was possible. Marcus stood in his office on Earth, looking at a picture on his wall. It showed that moment in the Grand Hall when he had closed the treaty and walked away. Someone had captured it perfectly, his back straight, his head high, his footsteps echoing in a silent room. Director Morrison came in without knocking, a habit she had developed. "We just got word from the Trescan Unity. They want to join the coalition. That makes 64. Marcus smiled. 64 species who learned they can walk away from bad deals. "All because one person did it first," Sarah said. "No," Marcus corrected gently. "All because we remembered that dignity isn't something others grant us. It's something we claim for ourselves." Outside his window, the sun was setting over Geneva. Somewhere above, in the vast darkness of space, 64 species were learning to work together with trust and honesty. The galaxy was changing, and it had started with a single word: no, the end.